of the new year. I hope everybody's had a good vacation. If you'll join me now and stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. At this time, I will take attendance. Ms. Anderson.
Present.
Mr. Clay.
Here.
Mr. Kreisman.
Here.
Mr. Fadley will be joining us shortly. Mr. Moldenhauer.
Here.
Mr. Leonard.
Here.
And myself. Moving on to accepting the minutes of our last meeting.
So moved.
I have a motion to accept the minutes.
Second.
I have a second. All those in favor?
There's a discussion.
I'm sorry.
There was item 13 listed, the agreed upon price for the land sales is $36,000. It was, should have been 72, shouldn't it?
And we made that corrected change and put it at your place setting this morning, showing 72,000. But the meeting minutes as presented in the board package were incorrect, and we have since made that correction.
Very good, thank you.
Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. In addition, our future meetings, February the 10th, March the 9th, future holiday for Easter will be April the 12th. Moving on to item number 3, which is the employee recognition. At this time, we have 2 employees to recognize: Mr. Kevin Rogers for 25 years and Mr. Castillo for 5 years. Mr. Castillo cannot join us today, but Mr. Rogers is here right now.
Right down front.
Hey, Kevin.
As always, it's my pleasure to present these to you, Mr. Rogers, for your dedication to the OUA for 25 years. That's almost another 25 more years. Thank you, sir. Very much.
25 more.
Try to find employees, ladies and gentlemen, to work. And moving on to agenda item number 4 is our consent agenda.
Motion to accept the consent agenda.
Second. Motion to accept. I have a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Moving on to item agenda number 14.
Mr. Chairman and board members, Murray Hamilton with formerly PRMG, who has presented to the board several times in the past, along with Henry Thomas. He's here now representing Rotellus, and he is here to do the financial forecast update for FY20 to 25, looking at the base case for the OUA in this 5-year window, not considering some of the major capital projects that are in the works with the Southwest section, both Project 1 and 2. And or any other projects that come up, whether that's Pine Ridge Park or Okatani. But to that note, in your board package, you can see his presentation that he will be going over this morning. I am sure that he will take your questions as you go along, or there will certainly be a question and answer period at the end. So with much further anticipation, here's Mr. Hamilton.
Thank you, Mr. Hayford. Morning, Mr. Chair, members of the board. Again, for the record, my name is Murray Hamilton. I'm a senior manager with Raftalis. We're a utility rate and financial consulting firm with our Florida offices located just up the road in Maitland, Florida. As Mr. Hayford pointed out, I've had the pleasure to work with the authority for more than 14 years now, providing utility rate and financial planning services. The last study that we prepared and presented to this board was approximately 2 years ago, where we evaluated your current operations as well as some plans. We tested the feasibility of doing certain sewer expansion projects in that study as well. The board actually implemented new rates last year in 2019 based on the results of that study. And recently, staff had asked us to come back and update the financial forecast. So that's really what we're prepared to do here today. Our discussion topics are going to include a review of your current operating conditions and financial position, major issues that we've talked with staff about that are going on within the utility system, specifically identification of assets that need to be replaced over the study period. We'll talk about the updated financial forecast, the major assumptions that we've used up to this point in preparing them, revenue sufficiency under your current rates as they're in place today, and then what we've brought today is a projection of what we think the future rate adjustments may need to be, along with some utility bill comparisons. Now, the major issues that are outlined over the next couple of slides is really just meant to be a summary. We're going to go a little bit further in detail if you have questions throughout the presentation. But as Mr. Hayford pointed out, the focus of this update was really on current operations today. We haven't evaluated the Southwest projects yet, specifically the septic to sewer under Project 1, which we anticipate at this point to not have a lot of upfront capital costs to the utility system and currently isn't planned to generate any significant revenues. So our current plan is to come back to you within approximately 90 days or when that information is available from the engineers and provide an updated financial forecast and look at the feasibility, again, of the Southwest project, specifically number 2, and of course any other projects that you may identify between now and then. Some high-level assumptions here. Customer sales and revenue growth is assumed to continue to be modest within the system. Again, that's aside from any major expansion project, while the operating expenses as currently budgeted are projected to grow about 3% per year over the study period, again, based on key inflationary assumptions we've made. And we've got a detailed slide back in the back of the document that talks a little bit more about the operating expenses and what we've assumed in that particular case. The capital expenditures, the cash balances today are fairly healthy, but the utility system has a number of projects that are already on the books, already appropriated, if you will, and so we're going to be funding about $4.9 million, almost $5 million in projects from those cash reserves over the next year. It may go into 2021 as well, but as you're going to see in the next slide, when the 2020 budget was put together, we did have a slight shortfall in terms of net revenues. We were able to satisfy that with use of the rate stabilization fund in order to cure that. But what you're going to see in the next slide is that the current budget summary isn't quite adequate to fund the existing and future capital needs of the system over time. And so slide 5 there is really just a recap of the adopted budget that was implemented for this current year. You can see we've got revenues at the top, and that $75,000 transfer is what helped balance the budget this year, again, from that rate stabilization fund, which is the purpose of that rate stabilization fund. It helped you delay or avoid a rate increase in this particular budget year, but obviously any shortfall is not sustainable in the long term. Secondly, what I would point out in this schedule here is while we do have a net cash flow of approximately $308,000 at the last line, and that, again, that was adequate for this current year because we have the cash reserves to deal with that $5 million in capital. Looking forward, we have a need of recurring replacing existing assets of approximately $900,000 a year. And the next couple slides will give you a little bit more detail about what type of asset replacements that we're talking about. Specifically your older water mains throughout the service area, gravity sewer line replacement and rehabilitation. The lift stations need to be rehabilitated, includes pump replacements. Generator additions and replacements over the study period, the manhole rehabilitation program, and then there's some SCADA improvements throughout the overall plan. The way that comes back in the form of utility rates is shown on slide 7. Again, this is a projection of those needs over the next 5 years, specifically rate funded. Okay, so again, for this particular case that we've evaluated, we don't think it's necessarily appropriate to finance these kinds of reoccurring capital improvements. They're going to be recurring. They're going to occur every year. The annual average is approximately $900,000 per year. So again, just talking about the current budget, the 2020 budget, the cash flow that the 2020 budget produces is about $300,000 towards capital. It's only about 3% of the system revenues, 10% of your annual depreciation expense, if you want to quantify it in that regard. $900,000 per year would be roughly 9% of the system revenues annually, which to me, for an aging system, is more comparable. I usually see between 10 and 15% annually, and for some older systems, anywhere between 20 and 25% annually being funded through rate revenues in order to maintain the system. So while it's higher than what the current budget allows for, it's certainly lower than your peers at the current moment. A summary of our overall study tasks. Again, we're updating the financial forecast really for the 6-year period from fiscal year 20 through 25. We've developed a funding strategy to pay for system operations and capital, as well as debt service for the system. We're testing compliance with your lender covenants. We refer to this as the debt service coverage ratio. As a reminder, that's the net revenues after the payment of operating expense when compared to your principal and interest payment on your debts. We have minimum requirements set forth for your senior lien debt, which are your BB&T bank loans. It's a minimum of a 110% ratio, if you will. For your junior lien debt, the SRF loan, that's remaining is 115%. Now, the board some years ago set an internal target to not target the minimum, and that target for the all-in junior lien debt is 120%. And that's what you set your budget by. And quite frankly, that's what necessitated the use of the rate stabilization fund this year. And again, we've provided a projection of future rate adjustments. Slide 9, really, I won't go in detail here. It's just a recap of our overall scope of services and the work that we've done here. Your staff reviews the budget with you every year. So every year they're evaluating rates internally, and periodically they check in with us on an annual basis to assist in that review of the budget. Quite frankly, our projections include a review of future customers and sales of the system, revenues, as well as operating expense, the capital plan that we've already talked quite a bit about at this point, maintaining your reserve fund levels over the study period, again, as established by the board. And on slide 10 is just a recap of what we've reviewed up to this point. We're referring to this specific financial forecast as our base case. You know, again, it does not include any expansion-related scenarios that may be evaluated, specifically the Southwest project. So it's really intended to focus just on your current operations as things are today, and as we anticipate them to change over the next couple of years. Again, we didn't assume any new debt to finance the replacement of the existing assets. And again, well, the projections are based on your current rates and fees as they're in place today. And as you may recall, for your new customers connecting to the system, this board has elected to have a discount and the capital connection charges, as well as the meter installation fees. And at least for the purposes of preparing these estimates today, we've assumed that those discounts are going to remain in place for the 5-year period. Obviously, this board has the authority and opportunity to adjust that as they seem necessary. And then lastly, as we've already pointed out, we anticipate using $4.9 million to fund those previously approved projects, including the water storage tank, the traffic circle, as well as the water main on 28th Street. For the revenue assumptions over the next 5 to 6 years, again, we're anticipating some modest customer growth, about 0.25% per year on average. This is a 5-year rate plan. I would tell you over the last couple years, your actual growth has exceeded this, okay? So again, we're trying to be a little bit conservative here. Obviously, there's an ebb and flow in the development cycle. We've all seen that statewide. Over the 6-year period, it would be roughly 150 new water connections, 72 wastewater connections over that period. And again, that's excluding any sewer expansion projects that you might anticipate. The projection of revenues and income, again, are based on your current rate schedules, which also includes the discount on the new connection and capital connection charges. And again, we've assumed that was extended through 2025. Slide 12 provides you a projection of the gross revenues of the system. So these are annual recurring. They include the rates paid by for monthly service, the base charge, the usage charge, or the gallonage rate in the tariff. It also includes all the miscellaneous and service charge revenue, investment income on your cash reserve balances that occur. And in the big picture from 2020, where the revenues are roughly $10.4 million in total, they're anticipated to grow to roughly $10.5 million over the 6-year period by 2025. So again, just under 0.25% per year annual average growth. Again, very modest based on those overall customer growth assumptions. This is the detailed slide here, slide 13 and then 14, on operating expenses. So again, we've predicated it on your fiscal year 2020 budget. There are no new employee positions anticipated over the 5-year period under this base case. However, if we have unfilled positions in that current budget, obviously we're assuming they're going to be filled at some point during this 5-year period. In terms of trying to estimate inflation over the study period for labor and benefits, we've assumed 3% system-wide. That's a combination of cost of living and merit adjustments. And obviously, while it may be different within the system-wide, we're assuming those costs are going to increase on average 3% a year. For health insurance, and this is a little bit unique, but not unique. As the costs increase on the health care side, the board's policy has been in the past to pass that through the employee contributions, and then there's a true-up periodically after several years. So we've tried to anticipate that true-up about the 4th year of the study period, again on the health insurance, and we've estimated that as best we can at about 4%. Liability property insurance, 1.5% per year, again based on recent history. And Mr. Gall helped us pull that information together. Repairs and maintenance, approximately 3% a year. For electric, gas, chemicals, we've assumed 5% per year plus whatever growth is within the system. And then our overall inflationary adjustment to all the other expenses is approximately 2.5%. And again, that comes to us from the Congressional Budget Office annually. And of course, that's a reflection primarily of our monetary policy nationwide. Slide 14 provides you a projection of those expenses over the 6-year period. The weighted annual average increase is about 3% a year. 3.1% is shown there in the middle of the slide. And again, it's predicated on the adopted budget levels, and again, it excludes any new employee positions above the current budgeted levels. Slide 15 is a projection of your current loan payments, your debt payments. What I'd like to point out is over the recent history, the authority has really focused on debt retirement, which does provide a measurable and distinct savings to the customers. And so recently you've paid off your SRF loan 2 and 3 have been paid down over time. And so what's now remaining are your 2 BB&T loans that you have there at the bottom of the schedule, which are senior lien in nature, and then your junior lien loan, SRF loan number 1, which is still remaining at the top. You can see the payments are practically level throughout the study period, $2.4 million per year, including both the principal and the interest payments on those loans. And again, we're not assuming any new debt for the study period. Slide 16 is really just meant to recap some of the board's policies regarding its cash reserves. We have a requirement through the bond resolution to maintain the renewal and replacement fund equal to 5% of the annual gross revenues. It's about $500,000 per year that's retained in that specific fund. By the authority of the board, they've established an emergency reserve fund and an operating reserve fund, both which sets aside funds for contingency for the system. 30 days of operating expenses for the emergency fund and 90 days for the operating reserve fund. Collectively, these three funds are $3 million in any particular budget year. Again, as we've reiterated several times already, we have these previously approved projects. They would substantially draw down the rate stabilization fund by approximately $2.3 million. And the existing capital improvements fund as well as the general operating fund by $2.6 million. And again, collectively, that's the $4.9 million in previously approved projects. Slide 17 demonstrates the annual transfers that may be required to those reserve funds. Again, as a number of days of operating expense or 5% of gross revenues for the purposes of the renewal and replacement fund, they're a function of our assumptions about revenues and expenses in the future. Obviously, staff is going to continue to evaluate these fund balances each and every budget year, and so the actual transfers may be somewhat different, but these are the best estimates that we have at this point. The next three slides will give you a summary by system, because we do look at the costs on a standalone basis for the water system as well as for the wastewater system, and then we pull it collectively back and we look at it system-wide. So slide 18 really just focuses on the water system by itself. You can see in our 2020 year we have a slight deficiency of $37,500. That's half of that $75,000 transfer from the rate stabilization fund. So again, for the purposes of balancing our budget, we were okay. We were able to use the rate stabilization fund. But as we move forward, because we've already we're planning to use the $4.9 million in other project funding, we're not going to have a nest egg of reserves in order to continue to bridge the gap going forward. So over time, as the operating expenses increase, as we have the need to fund additional renewal and replacement of our existing assets, you can see the deficiency for the water system grows each and every year to a cumulative deficit of approximately 14% by that sixth year. And the story is almost exactly true with the wastewater system. Slightly different numbers, about equivalent percentages. Again, the slight shortfall in the budget year, again, that was satisfied with your rate stabilization fund transfer. And then those revenue requirements are increasing over time relative to your current rates, and we get to a slight deficiency of 12% on wastewater. Slide 20 again shows the collective summary. And so, in dollars and cents, where this really all kind of comes down to is without a rate adjustment, by 2022, our cash reserve balances would fall below our stated minimums. We would no longer be able to maintain the 30 and the 90-day emergency reserve funds and operating funds as it's been set by policy, okay, if we didn't make any rate adjustment. More importantly, though, and even if we had cash reserves in the bank to cure that deficiency, in 2023 we actually have a deficiency in meeting that debt service coverage ratio. We no longer have annual revenues to satisfy the operating expenses as well as the existing debt service. And again, it's a function of inflation. So, I mean, that's why the study assumptions are important. But by 2023, we see a deficiency in that overall debt service coverage requirement, which would require a rate increase anyway. Doesn't matter how much money we have in the bank. So we need to kind of keep that in mind. So the study considerations, which are also important, again, we're assuming that we're going to continue to fund these recurring capital maintenance items, the replacement of our existing assets over the study period. We do want to maintain those minimum cash reserves as we've set forth by policy. And we'd like to exceed our minimum debt service coverage requirements. Now, I will tell you this. By default, if we do the first bullet on this page and we fund the capital needs of the system, by default, we'll have a good coverage ratio. And I'll show you a slide later on based on the projected rate increases. So if we fund the capital, by default, we'll have a good covenant. One of the reasons the lenders set a minimum debt service coverage ratio is to require you to have a cash flow in order to maintain the system. The issue in this particular case is that minimum requirement only produces about $300,000 a year in cash flow, and your current needs are projected to be about $900,000. So it's not something that we specifically have to cure in 1 year. We can phase it in over time, and that's really what we're going to look at here. The last item I want to talk to you about is we've made another assumption here. You know, one of our thoughts in keeping in mind is to make sure we don't accidentally set rates too high, okay? We do recognize that every year, you know, staff goes back, they review the budget documents, they review the actual results for the year, and in the last recent years, we've had a very positive budget to actual variance, if you will. The system has performed better, whether you've added more customers than was intended or operating expenses were slightly lower. We've performed better. And so in that, we've assumed that the system's going to continue to perform better than budget by $350,000 per year in an effort to not set the rates too high. And obviously, staff's going to continue to evaluate that each and every year. You know, to the extent we fully fill all the budgeted positions and we actually spend the entire budget, we may have to come back and revise this financial forecast. But the purpose of this last bullet, again, is an effort to not set the rates too high. Slide 22 is a recap of the annual rate adjustments. Again, it excludes any of the expansion projects over the 6-year period. We've shown a 6-year rate path here, which includes an interim adjustment this current fiscal year in April. So a mid-year adjustment with the remaining adjustments starting in October. And primarily, the reason that we've elected to do that is, you know, we could defer the rate increase to 2021. But some of the metrics are very specific, you know, they're time certain, and so we still have to achieve the same revenue target by the end of the 5-year forecast. And so if we delay the rate increase to 2021, then instead of a 2% annual rate increase over the next 6 years, we would need 2.6% annual rate increase, almost 3% for 5 years. Okay, the net savings to the customer is about $1 per month per typical bill for water and sewer service. So there's a distinct savings to the customer by starting a little sooner this year in 2020, even though the budget is balanced. If we start a little bit earlier over the 6-year period, we'll save the customers $1 per month in their typical bill, about 1%. Also included on this schedule for your reference is just the annual revenues that are derived from those rate adjustments. The last number I'll point out is the $1.2 million by the last year. If you go back to the previous slides, you'll see that our deficiency was about $1.3 million. Again, we're trying to be precise. It's not a perfect break even, but we're also trying to look for a level plan that we can communicate to customers. The next 2 slides are a comparison at different usage levels. Most of your newer customers, okay, or senior customers for that matter, typically have lower use on average. And so your first bill example is based on 4,000 monthly gallons of water and sewer use. The next slide shows a similar bill, but at 6,000 gallons, which is about the system-wide average. One of the things I'd like to point out to you on here, while OUA's rates are to the right of this schedule, many of these city municipal utility systems do charge a surcharge outside the city limits, and that's not reflected here in this rate comparison. And those surcharges can range anywhere between 5 and 25% of the bill outside the city. So, keep that in mind. This bill comparison excludes taxes and surcharges, but it's not directly a fair representation of your particular case. If the recommendation of the first rate increase was approved by this board, the 4,000-gallon bill would increase from $89.21 to $90.99. It'd be a $1.78 increase in that typical bill for the first year. Again, assuming we made a April 1 rate adjustment. The 6,000-gallon bill is on slide 24. Obviously, more water use, so the bill is slightly higher. It's still a 2% adjustment from $115.81 to $118.13. It's a $2.32 per month increase, and again, that's for both water and sewer service. You have customers out there, about half the system have water-only service. Okay, so this represents about half of those customers that have both services. But obviously, we're applying the rate increases system-wide, 2%. So every customer, if approved, would see a 2% increase. The fact of the matter, it just depends on whether they have water and sewer service or water-only service, and then how much water do they use. The next few slides just show you the results if the rate adjustments were approved. Again, the water system, we're getting to about a break even by the sixth year. Wastewater system, same story. Again, we're making these gradual adjustments over the 6-year period. And then finally, system-wide. And again, to be honest with you, it's still a slight deficiency. We're trying not to set the rate too high. So by the last year, we're still short about 0.5%. But again, these are the best numbers that we have at the moment. And then, as I promised you, again, if we focus on maintaining the system, the capital infrastructure that's there to ensure the public health and safety of our customers, by default, you would have a good coverage margin. And it would provide the board a little bit more flexibility when that margin is up. You have a little bit more flexibility in terms of timing of rate adjustments. If your debt service coverage ratio is good enough, you could defer a rate increase, assuming you have cash in the bank in order to delay it or reduce it in the future. Where our current forecast, as I've communicated to you, even if we had more than enough money in the bank, by about our third or fourth year of the study period, we're seeing that we would not have an adequate coverage margin, and we would be required to raise rates just to maintain that level of minimum coverage. The unappropriated reserve fund balances is slide 29, and this is different than cash and investment balances, okay? Because you're going to get an audited financial statement here in the next couple months for the year end 2019. And the cash reserves that are in the bank are going to be fairly healthy. But as y'all look at your reserve funds through your budget process, we're talking about the unappropriated amount at the end of each year. And as I pointed out to you, we already have about $5 million worth of projects that's already appropriated. So that's been deducted from the cash balance. That's the difference between this schedule and what you'll see in your balance sheet. So I don't want you to get your financial statement a couple months from now and go, okay, well, what's wrong and what's the disconnect? It's the same information, it's just through a different microscope. Again, what's shown here is under the proposed rate adjustments, we would maintain our minimum reserve fund balances under that black line, which is approximately $3 million per year. Again, that's made up of your renewal and replacement fund minimum, your emergency fund, and your operating account. And then the funds that are above that, while they're smaller in nature, those are your unappropriated balances. There's monies in the wastewater capital connection fee fund that would be able to be used to deal with expansion-related projects. So there are other monies within these accounts that are going to be evaluated when we evaluate those expansion-related projects. The next couple slides are just a recap of our conclusions and recommendations. Again, just highlighting the fact that we do have approximately $5 million in previously appropriated projects that are anticipated to be spent. There's another $9 million in projects allocated over that 6-year period. A little more than half of those are being funded directly through utility rates and transfers annually. We do recommend that the board consider annual adjustments. Our current estimate right now is 2% per year over the 6-year period. Again, if we delay it to 2021, the rate increases would be higher per year, and ultimately the total bill would be greater too. Again, by starting sooner, we'd save the typical customer about $1 per month by that 5th year, even though rates are increasing. The proposed rate increases would be applied to the monthly base facility charge. That's the minimum charge on the bill, as well as the usage rates. They would not be applied to your miscellaneous fees or your special service-related charges. The board may want to look at that at some point in the future. Again, the base case does exclude those expansion-related projects, specifically the Southwest project. And we plan to return within 90 days or when the engineering work is done to provide you an update of what those results would look like under those expansion-related projects, specifically compared to this base case. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Overall, we look pretty healthy.
Yes, sir. Absolutely. Absolutely. You know, I've had a number of dialogue with Mr. Hayford as well as Mr. Gall and Mr. Cooley in the past.
Right.
You know, Basil would call me annually. You know, do we need to do a rate study? Do we not need to do a rate study? So, you know, while we're not necessarily hired to review your budget documents, we keep close tabs. And so I would tell you that historically, you've had a lot of flexibility in terms of when to adjust rates and when not to. You know, the last base case, I'll call it, that we presented to you 2 years ago, the rate path was very similar. It was 1.5% a year, so it was almost 2%. We made the first adjustment. Staff, when they put the 2020 budget together, did not specifically recommend an adjustment for 2020. I think that's what led to us being asked to update the financial forecast. I think that was predominantly because, one, we had healthy cash reserves. So, again, you got a lot of flexibility. They are reviewing this every year with the budget cycle. Okay, and then two, I think they intended to have us come back and specifically look at those expansion-related projects for Southwest. And we would look at the base case at that point anyway. But yes, sir, Mr. Clay, very healthy.
Murray, I have a question, and I'm not trying to back you in a corner, and I'd like
Sure.
a general answer. That's what I'm shooting for here. I know everything's based on a base case rate adjustment. With the Southwest section, which you're going to give us in 90 days, adding 500 to 700 customers, let's say hypothetically, is that going to stop the cash hemorrhage by adding that many customers, or is just going to, the hemorrhage still going to be there just with more
Okay.
customers?
The hemorrhage is here. We're on the cusp of it. Okay. So to specifically answer your question, those customers will be very valuable to the system, but obviously they're going to be added in increments over time. So because our shortfall is by 2022, 2023 timeline, and I haven't seen the details, a lot of this depends on when they come on, how they come on, and then part of what I think the scope is of that particular project, much like we did Treasure Island, if you recall. When we were looking at evaluating Treasure Island, we looked at many different types of funding scenarios. Do we want to try and discount any of the charges to those? So all of that would play into it. But I would tell you in the short term, the base case is probably the case we're focused on right now. And then these customers, if and when they do come on, do provide a substantial benefit to the system, no doubt. And again, they'll get a substantial service.
Exactly.
If I can add a little bit to that, though, also. The case that we have right now is what Murray suggested, that we knew that this was going to happen, and so we would defer any rate adjustment based upon the factual knowledge that they turn loose with us today, and that's where this 2% is. But keep in mind that what brought us here today, or certainly to look at, is the amount of money that we were having to take out of the rate stabilization fund to further balance the budget. I think the number was around 75,000, and that ultimately is what we have to address first. The other thing to take into account when we add, whether it's 500 customers or 700 customers from the Southwest, that's going to raise our operational cost also. So it's not like it's bring them on board and they're going to solve our financial problems. They're going to bring some expenses with them when they come on board, whether that's new employees, trucks, whatever the case may be. So it's a part of that process, and of course the annual debt service.
Debt service.
So that's why we would look at this in 90 days once we have a better understanding of what not only Project 1 and Project 2 cost us for the Southwest, but then they can go back and tweak those numbers to see where we're at with our revenues and our expenses associated with the total OUA project. Does that help answer your question?
Yeah, that's why I asked the question. I know cost comes with new customers. Would that stop the hemorrhage, or is it still going to be on the same ratio where we still need 2%, or would it maybe back to 2% down? Would it alleviate some of that?
Again, depending on the funding scenarios, it could save more in the short term with an offset in the future. So again, we're going to have to evaluate the numbers when we get them.
Again, not backing you in a corner. I know it's in 90 days we'll know more.
It's complicated.
It is that.
And clearly, this is strictly the base case without considering what Project 1 and Project 2 of the Southwest would bring us. So this does address the base case, what Project 2, which we know at this point is going to be made up of loan grant money, that is going to be a cost to us and an impact on an annual debt service payment.
So your rate increase that you're suggesting in April is going to be just about the time that you get us back our 90-day review?
If everything's on schedule, that would be about right.
About right.
It's all in the timing.
I didn't look at it that way. That's why the board's important.
There's another minor factor that's come up since you developed this, and that's our $1.5 million grant that we're fixing to do with the state. And I know that's not in your numbers
Right.
here. And I understand that just ripened,
Yes.
if you will. So that will be a factor that'll be considered.
Yes, sir.
I have one other thing for clarification, and I think John can help me with this. We've been referring to Southeast 28th Street. Is that actually Southeast 8th Avenue?
8th Avenue?
That is 28th Street in Treasure Island. I'll have to go back and check that, but that's an older galvanized steel main that we've had some problems with that we were talking about replacing.
So you haven't shared that with us yet.
That's on the schedule for the year, but we haven't gotten to that point yet. We have shared it with you in the overall budget. I believe you'll find it in your budget package, but we have not actually brought it as a project yet to be discussed openly by the board.
Thank you. I'm done.
That's all I got.
I'm done. Giving us a lot to digest.
I think down the road, we're going to have to continue with the rating.
Okay.
All right. We thank you, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Did you want to say something?
Should we move forward with a proposed rate increase then that could be canceled at a later date, or?
That's going to take some, that's setting a hearing, special hearing and all that. So at this point, I think that, I'm gathering this is for informational purposes.
Until we get the 90-day
We're
report.
talking about trying to enact something April 1st. I mean, we're not going to have,
That's going, staff's going to have to get on the,
that's why I wondered if we should move forward with it now. We could always cancel it
I'm sorry, what was the question?
with public hearings and a proposed rate increase at this point.
Well, you have that information in front of you from this report. To be able to move forward, then we would have to have a public hearing, and bring this back. We could not take any action today, but we could do the public advertisement for a hearing, and we could do that at some future meeting. And certainly that's what our suggestion would be, that if you're so inclined to move forward with this April 1st, that we put those, bring that back at a later public hearing, either at the February or the March meeting.
Then will you be bringing a recommendation at the February meeting?
We
Right
could
now,
have
there's no
the,
recommendation for the board.
With-
This
that-
was an
that could easily-
informational item.
yes,
So as far as the February meeting, you'll be a recommendation to the board to commence with the process of a 2% raise.
if that's the board direction today, yes, sir, that's what we would be doing.
So that would give us a public meeting March.
We could have two of them. We could have them February or March, but we do have to have a public hearing on this. So if the intent of the board was to move forward with this recommendation, we could schedule it for February with implementation 1 April. But we could go ahead and schedule that public hearing.
Well, I mean, we've kicked this ball down the road for 10 years now.
Yeah, the
I've
only
been
way
on
to
board
meet the
7.
April 1st rate increase would be to start now.
Yes.
Right.
You know, we did one year before. Our plans were to try to do one every year to keep up, and we didn't this year. So I think we need to go ahead and lay the groundwork so that we can do what's recommended in April instead of having to come back and ask for 3% a year.
Okay, so we'll set it up for February then.
Yes.
Okay.
Do we need a motion for that, or
I would think not, it's just a public hearing, yes, sir.
recommendation?
Yeah, you're not actually, this is really direction of the board for us to go back and set up the public hearing. I would think not, but I'll defer that to our attorney, but I would think not.
At this point, I think the appropriate thing would be a motion to direct staff to commence the process of a 2% raise.
So said.
A motion. And a second. And a third. Any further discussion?
Who's the second?
I didn't hear any of it.
Who was the
I think
second?
Harry made the motion.
Who was the second?
I can't make a motion.
Oh, I'm sorry. Mr. Clay,
I think it was Carl, didn't you?
Initially, it was me, but
Yeah, and then
Carl.
I
He made the
chimed in,
motion.
So it was Carl.
Motion's made. All I said was so said by what Tom had just said.
So you're first. Who was second then?
You want somebody fess up?
I'll step up if nobody else wants to.
Carl made the motion.
John scratching his head.
First, second.
Who was first?
Carl was first.
And Melanie second.
Melanie was
Okay.
second. Tommy was third.
I wasn't even in it.
Any further discussion?
Tried to be, though.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. Moving on to item agenda number 15, CAS Governmental Service Contract.
Okay, I think I got that one. All right.
One's on first, one's on second.
And I won't even ask who's on third. So, CS Governmental Services, previous board action back in September 2019, when the option of the contract was up for renewal, we were asked to bring it back at a later date with a 6-month contract where we could go out for RFPs at a later date with the understanding of the January and February legislative delegation meetings. So that being said, what you can find here is in your board package is a renewal of their contract with the understanding, the easy way to get around the 6-month deal, there is a cancellation period in there, so that if in 6 months you wanted to cancel the contract, we could, and then we go out for RFPs. Since our September meeting, again, I would point out to you that we have had multiple meetings with different legislators, whether state senators or House of Representatives. We've certainly been in other committee meetings, and you're well aware of the DEP grants that have been obtained by the OUA through the help of OUA board members, OUA staff, and certainly CAS Governmental Services. So to that end, in your board package is a proposed contract, and in that contract, you can see that there is a termination clause with 30-day advance notice, which would meet the 6-month deal if the board was so inclined to exercise that right.
My suggestion to the board, the amount of dollars and the hard work that Connie has been doing, and CAS and themselves, is giving us the dollars that we need right now. My suggestion would be to extend their contract for the full year. To go ahead and just do it for 6 months, I think could be detrimental to us.
Just for road, that we could change that with a contract. This is a 1-year contract with 2 one-year extensions, if the board was so inclined for that.
With a 30-day out.
Still with this termination clause, regardless whether it was in the first year,
Right.
second year, whenever. There is still the termination clause in there.
I mean, they're working hard for us. I've been in contact with Connie almost every single week. It's a different breed of people up in Tallahassee right now. We do have our foot in the door. There is a lot of money out there that we can possibly receive additional funding on, and as long as they're working this hard, I would like to see them, continue to bring the dollars into us.
Yeah, I agree. I just want to make sure, though, that when it goes stagnant, we can look elsewhere. And it's not stagnant right now. It's working very well. So I make a motion that we extend the contract for a year with 2 1-year
Yes, sir.
with CAS
Yes,
You're approving the contract as presented.
as presented.
as presented. There you go.
Nothing. I was going to make the motion to approve and execute, but Tommy did it.
Second?
A motion
Second.
carries, and I have a second by Mr. Leonard. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Moving on to item agenda number 16, Sumner Engineering Professional Services Southwest Project.
Mr. Chairman and board members, Jeff Sumner is here representing Sumner Engineering and Consulting, Inc. What you find in your board package is basically a recap of where we are with the Southwest project. I can certainly go through any of these issues if you want. I can go over them briefly. There is the original appropriation, LP 47021, which was earmarked, if you remember, for Treasure Island, which was redirected towards the Southwest project. Out of that was a total of $523,867 as under design, permitting, and construction. The original professional services contract with Sumner Engineering was to get the project kicked off and started up to about a 10% level, and that totaled $242,205. Both of these have been signed, executed, and were in progress. Recently, the OUA was the benefit of another state appropriation, LPQ 008, in the amount of $6 million that was, if you will, dedicated to the Southwest project and requested to be put on a fast-track expense record, which we have done. We are looking at several things today to reflect that. You can see that there is 3 elements to it: design and permitting, construction, and land purchase, totaling the $6 million. Today, you have here a part of the professional services contract that will be dealing with the $800,000 expense item, and that's essentially what you have in front of you today. The LPQ 008 has already been executed. Today, we would be looking at doing the professional services contract with Sumner Engineering in the amount of $724,136. which is, let's see, make sure I get this correctly here, which goes through all the, well, let me back up. We can go through that here in just a moment. Let me finish out this presentation. Then on the rest of the project that's remaining is both the professional services contract for Project 2 and the loan grant, which would be primarily the collection system, if you will, that would serve the Southwest project. So that being said, behind that synopsis is the actual engineering services agreement. You can see the scope of services, and essentially this is for project Part B and Part C for this project. If you will turn to, should have this marked. Certainly pages all the way up through page 10 is all of the specific items that they would be dealing with by task. And when you get to page 10, it's the outline of the fees, both design, permitting, bidding, and construction services, totaling the $724,136. If you have any specific questions concerning this professional servicing agreement, I can attempt to answer them, or Mr. Sumner is here and he can answer them.
What are we looking for here, John? Execution of this second phase?
Essentially just the professional services agreement, authorization to execute either by the chairman or, as requested here, Chairman.
What's need, Tom?
Well, I make a motion, we approve and execute the service agreement
The agreement as presented.
as submitted.
That's the motion.
Second.
Committed?
Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
While we're on this topic, are there any questions concerning the Southwest in general, Southwest project that we can answer?
Just the discount we're going to get on this, huh?
Okay.
When does the shovel start, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, when's the shovel going to hit
Okay.
the ground?
Well, we'll continue to move forward. Obviously, there is one more item here on the agenda that we would need to get to, but clearly, once we have that, the essence, we can start at NW15, which is the northern station, and move down, or we could start at the pump station site, wherever it may be, and move north, because we have to start with the surveying in that work before we really get too far into it. So there is stuff that can get started with this professional services contract, and hopefully once that gets going, there will be it'll be somewhat time consuming to get out and do the ground truthing, but once that's done, we will get started fully aware of getting these plans out the door and ready to go to construction.
Some of us are looking at drain fields. We need this sooner than later.
The Little Champ food store just down the, no, just kidding. It is in works, and unfortunately, there's really not a lot that we can do to speed up the process. But the good part about it is once we do get started with this, there is a lot of work involved in getting the survey done. But once it gets started, it'll move relatively quickly. Unfortunately, this Project 1 will not help you with the drain field problem. That would be primarily Project 2. And with Project 2, if you remember, we were going to work with the county on expediting the work at the southern end because they have a drainage project that they need to get done, but all of that would work fairly quickly.
It would really be quick if we could get Jeff out of here and go to work.
The agenda item. Moving on to item number 17, Pine Ridge Park Utility Expansion.
Mr. Chairman and board members, what you have here with Pine Ridge Park, the utility expansion, is you have a exhibit here. The red lines indicate the area that we would intend to provide both water service and wastewater service to. The remaining portions of Pine Ridge Park that are currently served by well and septic tank. You had delivered to you by later this weekend a copy of the actual agreement between the Okeechobee Utility Authority and the state with the allocation of the $1.5 million. But we can go through it here relatively quickly. When you look at the second page, there is a cost estimate for the construction of the gravity sewer area totaling $1.98, almost $2 million in total for construction. That would be inclusive of the connections of the house to the street, as well as a contingency line item and engineering fees for this project. The next page would show you the proposed layout of the water system that would provide both the domestic use as well as fire protection for that area. And then finally would be the cost element for the proposed water system, which totals roughly $427,000. What I can tell you is we have a total grant, as you're well aware, of only $1.5 million for the sewer, which leads us about $500,000 short out of OUA monies. What I can share with you is there's about $200,000 in this project for the connection of the houses to the streets. I would propose that any engineering proposal that we go through, that engineering firm is familiar with the TMDL grant process, which helps to provide for monies for that actual connection of the house to the street. So that ultimately would possibly provide up to $200,000 out of this $1.9 million. The other element is that there is some contingency money in there. It basically would ultimately say that out of the $1.98 million, that it would get it down closer to the $1.5 million allocated through the state appropriation, leaving us the net amount of about $200,000 out of pocket for 80 connections on the wastewater side. On the water side, there is approximately $127,000 as a material cost. With the fire hydrants, that puts it up right at about $140,000. Everything else is associated with labor, survey, design. I would propose to you that this type of project could be done by OUA, and as such, the OUA certainly would save on the engineering capabilities in-house as well as the construction, so that on the water side, ultimately, if you're looking at the net cost, would be basically the materials, the fire hydrant, and any survey requirements, which we would have to contract out. So that in a nutshell is the actual cost, if you will, is proposed is going to be roughly $2.5 million, of which we have the 1.5 grant. We get some TMDL money. We do some of the work in-house. I would think that for those 80 customers, we're down to about $400,000 cost.
John, I have a question.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, you finally hit it at the end. My number was 2.4 million, not 1.9, and you got to the 2.5. So we're right. We're both on the same page. Then we got to look at the contingencies and such. If we opted as a board not to go with the water side of it, how do you measure your waste water if it's on a well?
We don't. Our current policies basically define now that to be a wastewater customer, you have to be a water customer. In the past, the only way we were able to work it is to put a meter on the well, and then we always had a debate with people because they said, oh, so much was used for irrigation. It did not enter the system. So past OUA board policies have established that to be a wastewater customer, you have to be a water customer.
So if this board didn't look at it as a whole project, the 1.5 wouldn't benefit us all. We don't want to lose that. I mean, you guys have worked hard to get that money. But
Well,
we wouldn't be able to go forward with just the wastewater without the water, correct?
the 1.5 would go towards the wastewater only, yes, sir. And again, it's approximately 80 customers that we pick up. And if you remember the slides that Murray went over, for a 5-year period, they only projected 72, I think it was, wastewater connections. We're talking about all of them in 1 year for that 5-year window, and it was 150, almost 160 water customers. We're picking up about half of them in 1 year. So if it shares anything with you, it's the long-term benefit financially, health to the system, to bring on new customers. The problem I've always had with this situation, part of Pine Ridge Park had water and sewer, part of it didn't. This goes in to eliminate that whole process for the connection.
And summarizing, then you're going to have to get out and beat the bushes for $900,000 to fund this project, since we've got the 1.5.
Well, clearly, you know, the engineer that we go through the RFP process would be familiar with the TMDL grant program. So yes, we would hope that we could acquire some of that money, $200,000 out of the grant program, and then there would be monies. They are out there. They're, you know, allocated for contingency. Certainly, we would save, if you will, on the water project. We already have budgeted salaries for the year. So whether they're doing repair work or water installation, those monies have already been covered. There's money allocated for fuel and equipment use. And of course, you know, you have me for the engineering aspect of the water side. And again, there is a savings to the OUA. So if you looked at, I think it was $140,000 for materials out of a $400,000 project. I mean, it's a substantial savings.
So what you're looking at, what we're looking at today then is to approve to accept the $1.5 million assessment?
Well, John's got a pretty good outline on the last page of the recommendation. One is whether or not you approve the project. You approve the project, then you want the grant, and you approve the agreement with the FDEP. Then you approve the recommendation to go forward with an RFP. I mean, these are all outlined. I could combine them, but for purposes of auditing, the approval and the agreement with the FDEP really ought to be separate, I think.
Separate.
Yeah. So does the board approve with the project? That would be number one. As a capital project, as an OUA capital project.
Because we did receive a $1.5 million grant, I approve of it.
Well, I mean, that ought to be the first action that the board takes.
I would make a motion then that we proceed forward with the Pine Ridge Park wastewater project.
Well, that you,
Did I mess up again? Wastewater, this is just wastewater.
you are approving, or the recommendation of staff is that you approve the Pine Ridge Park Utility Expansion 2020 project for the water and wastewater system.
Christie, clean it up for me.
Second.
Have a motion, have a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Now, since you've approved the project, do you want to get the money for it? You approve the agreement for the grant with the FDEP.
Approve the execution of FDEP agreement to be executed by the board chair and OUA staff.
I have a motion. Do I have a
I'm reading
second?
it verbatim.
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Tommy, Clay.
Now
Do
you
we
need to
direct
approve,
board, or do we have to motion?
approve staff to advertise.
An RFQ for engineering services for the Pine Ridge Park expansion project.
I make a motion that we approve the OUA staff to advertise an RFQ for engineering services and design of the wastewater systems improvement of Pine Ridge, there it is.
Henry Park expand.
Second.
Utility mix.
In a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries.
I guess, John, do you want to serve on the board, on the review board
Sure.
when the RFQs come in?
Be glad to.
That'd be John Kreisman.
Do I have a motion for John to be?
Yes.
Second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Who was the second?
Tommy?
The motion was for me to sit on the review board.
Carl?
Boy, ain't none of us sharp today.
It must be Monday.
We're not a Prevagen.
Last thing staff is wanting is authorization by the board for the installation of the water system in the expansion project.
I make a motion that we approve OUA staff to move forward with the installation of the water main installation in Pine Ridge Park.
I have a motion by Mr. Clay.
Second.
Second by Mr. Leonard. Any further discussion?
John, you said you're going to handle the engineering on that?
Yes, sir.
Water runs downhill, remember? Water runs downhill, remember?
No, sir, it can run uphill with a pump.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Okay.
Done.
All right.
Well done.
Moving on to item agenda number 18, school board parcel.
Okay. Mr. Chairman and board members, you have in front of you either paper copies now, but they were emailed to you over the weekend. I believe it was up to version 3 of the sales contract for the purchase of a 2-acre parcel from the aforementioned school board property on Old Dixie. In your board package, you will have lots of different papers from the original request that was made to the school board by the OUA. In there, you also see the site appraisal that was done, site survey, an estimate of the legal fees to clear the underlying plat, and then this agreement for sale, 8-page document that was prepared by both OUA and school board council. It is out there. It's open for discussion. What's the pleasure of the board?
At this point, we can do this deal and move forward, right?
It's my understanding that when we went to the meeting, there were some issues raised by a couple school board members, directed their counsel to address. I'm assuming that's all been addressed in this agreement. And so they will take it up for review, hopefully approval at their meeting on the 21st.
And if we don't do this, we got to start the process over with someone else.
Well, if we don't move forward with this, we either have to try to go back to the school board and negotiate what the position is of the OUA board, or we do have to find other
Another
property.
piece of property.
Yes, sir. Either in that immediate vicinity or elsewhere within the project area.
Well, really, your choices are, if you don't do this, you find a willing seller elsewhere. Neither of those work, you're faced with, if you really got to have it, a condemnation. You're going to have to condemn a site, which you have the authority to do. It's expensive to do it, but
But if we cross the ditch, everybody's going to want the same amount of money for their property. So either we
Well,
pay it or we're going to go to condemnation.
if
or-
you do the condemnation, you're going to add the litigation costs on top of that, plus,
Right. And
plus the
18
owners.
months or whatever.
mean,
Yeah.
Well, nobody has stepped up to give us property, so wherever we get 2 acres, we are going to be purchasing it.
Is this, I see a copy of the contract, is this the red line version, the most recent one that the board has here?
I believe so, yes,
One
sir.
that was emailed was red line version.
Right, and I'm wondering if that's in the agenda.
Did you print? You did not print a copy of it? Sorry, it was emailed version 3. I have a copy here if you want to look through it.
I know, I saw the emailed redlined version. And the emailed redline version is the one that apparently, Jeff, you negotiated that.
John Castle just took it on his own to write that in. He says, you guys talk about it.
Okay, because I don't have any problem with it.
My version of it was a little simpler, and he said, no, we want this, this, and this, and
It was more housekeeping than anything else, as
Yeah.
far as I was concerned on the redlining.
up to and including the great deal you're getting, plus paying the attorney's fees, which I wasn't thrilled with, but
That, if the board approves, this is an offer that you're submitting to the school board, which they have to consider at their meeting next week.
yeah, I probably,
As long as you say it's good, I'm good with it. You got a little more
If I
education.
can, I was present at the school board meeting with John and Jeff and got to sit back and hear all this, and it's not as simple as it sounds. You know, number one, the price of the property is high, that we've offered, and that came out of the appraisal, but it is what it is. We offered that price. Now, because of the condemnation, now we're responsible for the school board's attorney fees because you have to recluse yourself because you're.
Oh, yeah, I'm-
parties. Okay, that's bad enough. We've already got a little bit of an investment with the surveys and things going in there. The thing that bothers me the most is, if I understood correctly, the next meeting, which is the 21st of this month,
That is correct.
okay, now they're going to surplus this land. Then 30 days from that,
Okay,
they're-
but wait a minute. If they want to go through with, I mean, I've got to sit at that meeting too.
Yeah.
If they want to accept the offer, my recommendation is they go on and surplus the property right there. If they don't surplus the property, they got no business accepting the offer. I think the two go together. If they don't want to accept the offer, then they shouldn't declare that portion of their parcel to be surplus. So I don't see that being a hurdle.
now they meet monthly. They would have to do that at once a month. Okay, let's take that out. Then they have to have a public hearing, then they have to do a sale. And we're looking at 120
No,
days.
no,
for
they're
this.
dealing with they're dealing with the fellow governmental agency.
Okay.
They're dealing with the fellow governmental agency. They would declare it surplus right there and approve the contract right there, one meeting.
And we can
Agree with
move
that,
on.
But it didn't sure sound like that the other night. It looked like we were looking at 90.
No, I was
120
telling them
days.
that they would have to declare it as surplus
Right, and
in order
we're
to do
4
the
months down
sale.
the road doing it that way. So if they could accept it and move forward,
Yes,
you know, we're on a 2-year window here to spend the grant money productively, and.
Well, you're going to argue with the Fulfors for 3 months over price,
I don't know. That'd be up to Jeff.
you know. You want to go sit with them?
what, do you want to submit the offer? I
I'd
mean,
rather
that's the
submit
basic
the
question.
offer myself and move forward,
That's what you need to do, based on the contract,
because
the red line contract.
what you said just cleaned up your concerns, right?
To an extent, yeah.
Yeah.
Except for the
Lawyer.
price, the price being about 15,000 high, and attorney's fees and everything else that goes with it. But we made the offer, so we made the offer.
Yes.
We didn't do an overall survey of the area, what the properties were going for.
So the proper action would be to approve the contract to be submitted to the board as in the red line version, the corrected version, the complete version.
So
Which was
said.
which was emailed to you guys.
I have a motion by Mr. Clay,
To submit the contract as finally amended to the school board.
as said.
So said.
I guess it is.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Leonard. Any further discussion?
I'll attach it later.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Okay. This gets submitted for them to put on the agenda for the 21st. I think their agendas, they usually get their agenda out a week early, so I mean,
The meeting has been moved to the 21st, that's all I can tell you, so we'll get it over to them directly.
next.
Moving on to item agenda 19, November 2020 Board of Directors meeting.
Mr. Chairman and board members, the county has reached out to us in that this is an election year. If there is a need for a recount of the vote, or if there's something that holds them up, they will be needing the board meeting for that canvassing. So that being said, our current deal is that it's set for November 9th is our meeting that has been approved, but they need the board meeting. So can we move the board meeting to the 2nd or the 16th or possibly on the 10th? I can only caution you that on the 10th, I don't know how many days they actually need the BOCC chambers for the recount. I wouldn't think it would be much. Are they okay with the 10th? Evidently, they said we would be okay to use it for the 10th. So I would ask the board, do you want to move the meeting to the 2nd, the 10th, or the 16th?
I need to be on Monday is all I can tell you, so
Keep it on the
2nd or 16th, doesn't matter to me.
2nd.
Fine with either one.
Harry? Is that okay?
Fine.
Either one.
Okay. So we need, do I have a motion to accept? November.
Motion for
2nd.
November 2nd?
Yes.
We move the meeting to November 2nd.
Have a motion.
Second.
Second. Further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. We are moving the meeting November to Monday, November 2nd, 10 a.m.
That just shortens up y'all's time period to get our stuff to us.
It's okay. Happens.
All right. Moving on to item agenda number 20. More to Life Ministries wastewater installation.
Mr. Chairman, board members, in your board package, again, there was a email sent out depicting where More to Life Ministries is proposing to build their facilities on Northeast 39th Boulevard, which is going out to the Evergreen Cemetery. There is an existing forest main there, but they would need water to provide both domestic and fire protection for their facilities. You can see that there is a cost estimate in there for a cost estimate that was done a while ago on an 8-inch water main and a 12-inch water main. The size of that water main would be dependent upon the demand. That demand is really going to be a fire demand that's put on the system. So I don't know at this time whether it's an 8-inch water main or a 12-inch water main. But to that end, they asked to be able to speak to the OUA board this morning to discuss their project and whether there would be any willingness to cost share for the installation of a water main. I can only tell you from my perspective, I was hoping to put this on the February meeting where we might have a little more information. I do not have any confirmation from the Boys and Girls School or obviously the R-Bar Estates area as to whether they would be willing to connect up. What I can tell you is that that would be an element that we would need to address to find out if there is what the benefit to the OUA for extending the water main down Northeast 39th Boulevard.
John, is there a homeowner association at R-Bar?
Only for a part of it.
Okay.
The newest part, I guess the inner part actually.
Part you
has-
live in?
Yes, sir. And yes, sir, I do live out there, and yes, I'm on a well and a septic tank, and I would be on the OUA at a drop of a hat if I could, but I can't. So
Well-
I'm one in favor, yes, of a OUA water service.
What would it take to get someone to do a survey out there?
I would think we would probably have to do a circular, some kind of mail, paperwork explaining what the cost would be, what the cost would be to the residents, both either from a construction standpoint or what the ongoing monthly fee might be for a house, so that they can look at what their cost for salt, peroxide, chlorine, whatever they put into their water treatment system, and see what that benefit is to have the water delivered to them at pressure and to provide fire protection, which may be a benefit to their homeowner's insurance.
So we could look at that, and then you said possibly running across. I know we had talked about at one time going over to the boys' school with sewage and everything at one point.
We already accept their wastewater because the
Okay.
plant was, I guess, failing. And we get water from them, although they don't use it too much. It's not, but anyway, be that as it may. So what we would look at doing is running a line out to them so that they could take their treatment plant offline, their water treatment plant. And at the point, they were having problems staying in compliance. I do not know what they are today, but it would be a fairly lengthy process to find the right person that could say yes or no that they'd want to do it. And if they do, they're like us, they work under an annual budget, and so we would have to work with them on what that cost would be and in what year we could do it.
Well, didn't we at one time look at a right-of-way across through there and all?
At one point in time, when we were looking at purchasing the property from the state,
Right.
we were going to get a portion of the property from that parcel so that we could get a buffer on the north side. At that same point, we were looking at doing the water service for them, but the cost was probably the sticking point. So if we're able to, say, fund the construction, and then all they have to do is pay for the connection fees, maybe that's going to be more palatable to them. But we would have to reach out to them to discuss if that's going to be a benefit to us. Clearly, having More to Life Ministries as a customer, both water and wastewater, is a benefit to us. The question is, really in my mind, are we going to have other customers out there other than More to Life Ministries? Or can we get the Boys and Girls School to sign up? Can we get our bar states? That would be the selling point.
Yeah, I think you have to ask that question of our bar, kind of get the pulse of what's going on there. I mean, because we'd need something past them to, I would think, wouldn't you? I mean,
Well, from a maintenance standpoint, certainly if we size it appropriately, then More to Life Ministries would be at the end of the piping system, and so that helps us out on a maintenance deal. But to grow the system, if we were to get somebody like the Boys and Girls School, and certainly our bar, whether that's 50 to 100 new connections, certainly there is some benefit out there. And what we would certainly share with anybody is their monthly cost for salt or peroxide or chlorine versus what our base cost is, and the benefit that we would provide water regardless whether they lost power and they lost the use of their well or they had to have a generator. There is certainly some selling points to it.
and you use peroxide and salt and all in yours?
Yes, sir.
Property value increase.
Well-
Property value.
Well, I mean, again,
Just if I can add one thing, I had a meeting with County Commission Chair a couple of weeks ago, and we were discussing funding mechanisms and things for wastewater. They're very concerned with the R-Bar area out there, with the proximity to Taylor Creek. And they think, or he seemed to allude that there may be some money available because of the tributary that goes into the lake with the Taylor Creek. So there might be some funding out there also for the wastewater end of it we might want to look into.
And that's all well and good, and certainly the problem that we would, I mean, it's not a problem, but certainly we could look at it. And again, the idea that those are relatively big lots, and clearly from the fire protection standpoint, which they do not have now, they would have that benefit of having a water main out there. So I'm sure that there would be some positive impact on their fire insurance needs on their homeowners.
I believe this is one part of extending infrastructure would be both beneficial to the residents and OUA to grow our system. That's one area right there that everybody was a win-win. So I think it's worth some more information.
but I see we got a builder here, we got an engineer here, and we got a preacher here.
Everybody be careful, More to Life is well represented.
Steve Dobbs, 1062 Jakes Way for the record, representing More to Life. We historically, in about 2006, 2007, I permitted this water main for a different project. So we already have construction drawings ready to go. You know, one of the things when More to Life brought me in to look at the system and look at, you know, what they were doing, we started adding up all the costs. And, you know, and like I say, what we're trying to do is if we can get water and wastewater, one of the things they really don't want to do is have to put in a septic tank out there. But as John alluded to earlier, you can't have wastewater without having water. So that kind of put More to Life, like I said, they really want the wastewater. And, you know, like I say, and in conversations with John, he said, well, we'll take it to the board and, you know, see what you guys think. So, like I say, I'm here to answer any technical questions or, you know, one of the other things that More to Life is looking at is, you know, the fire protection aspect of it. They did construct a pond on site, which can be used with a draft hydrant to supply water or fire water. However, you have to get that certified. You know, the last time I did that, I did it for a church just up the road because they weren't getting benefit from their insurance company to do that. So you have to go through the ISO, and I'm sorry if I'm making your eyes roll back in your head, but it's a little bit technical. But anyway, basically what you got to do is you got to go out and do a 50-year drought analysis. You have to go out and make sure that your draft hydrant is low enough and you have enough water, 2 hours of water above that draft hydrant, above vortex, to be able to supply the fire water. You know, and like I say, that's not a free process, and it's not anything that I can do by myself. I have to have a surveyor, I got to have a geotechnical engineer, you know, but then that, you know, at the end of the day, that does provide a savings for the insurance. But so like I say, all in all, with all the costs rolled in and everything, you know, we're, like I say, trying to get services. They want to be a customer. Just, you know, seeing if there's anything that we could work together to try to get that water further down the street. Now, I've worked on several projects up on north on 441 that have almost brought water down up 441, which I know there are a bunch of people up there who'd love to get on, you know, OUA at some point in time. But right now I don't have the time or effort to try to get everybody together to put that together. But there are people up there who are interested.
Well, like John said, if there's monies out there, I mean, it's $171,000 to do this project. We would have to have more customers to be able to make this
Right.
work.
We'll gladly put in the water pipe and the sewer in for you. There's all about dollars, and we're just looking to alleviate the cash.
I understand, right?
Yeah, we just got to figure out how to pay for it.
Yes, sir.
Let us go to work.
Okay.
I would suggest that, I don't know, what's y'all's time frame? I mean, you got the builders sitting here, that's kind of got me worried.
I think I was still lost a little bit about you needing fire water. I'm just,
How you doing, Corey Penrod, Penrod Construction Company? We have everything architecturally, civil, ready to go, pretty much. It's just pretty much locking in the financing is the point we're at now. Trying to figure out the cost of the overall project has a lot to do with the financing end of it. That's pretty much where we're based at right now. I mean, once we get the loan locked in, or, you know, where our finances is coming from, we'll be able to move forward with construction. So it's figuring out this cost, this hard cost, because this is a big part of it. A lot of times, you know, especially when there's fire protection involved, it can make or break a project. So how we're bringing water in, how water's going out is pretty much, we're trying to figure out the hard cost on this part right now. And, you know, it could be significant difference in cost.
John, how long do you think it would take you to get us some information back?
Well, I mean, based upon our schedule, I could bring it back by way of February, the next meeting. We could try to reach out. Now, I don't know if I'm going to get an answer from the Boys and Girls School. Certainly, our bar, we could get some contact information out. If they respond, we would have something by the next meeting.
Now, the piece of property you guys are on, does it touch the trailer park behind you? It doesn't? There's a piece in between?
The church actually, for the record, I'm Danny Enfinger, and
I'm going to get you all up here.
Morning, folks. The church, Assembly of God, which is Abundant Blessings north of the ARS.
Right.
It runs back there and joins us in the back.
Okay.
So there's actually a parcel between us and the mobile home park. But that church would be a customer as well as the mobile home park.
Well, that's
And
what I'm
there's-
just thinking.
There's
how
a
do we
lot
get
of
to the
people
mobile
back
home
there.
park?
Yes. Yes.
Danny, does the property border Taylor Creek?
It just actually does not, there's actually a little buffer there that Gene Daniels owns. Gene,
Right.
yeah, Gene owns that piece on that other corner, which would be that north east corner there of the creek, but somehow, if you look on, I don't know how it happened, but he owns about 50 feet on to this side of the creek. I don't know how that happened, but he runs that runs all the way up. So we actually don't own to the creek. There's actually a dike there and some other things, and there's actually a 30-foot easement of some sort that we butt up against headed to the creek. Problem is that easement's full of cypress trees and everything in the world, so we've had it surveyed, and it's actually 30 feet of what would be access to that property, but I don't know how you'd ever access it.
That's something to think about, that trailer park over there. That's pretty good guys on that.
Yeah.
I'd ask. I mean,
They are my clients as well. If it'll help, I can see if there's any interest there.
and they're home right now, too.
Whatever information you can bring back. to
They're
us.
getting ready to leave, though.
We'll speed
The
things
fair's
up.
getting
Yeah,
ready to start.
yeah.
I would,
Well, I've got a cell phone number, so.
I can get it, but I don't have it. I would suggest that we ask John to proceed and get us some information back here to see what we can do, if there's any way we can participate.
And certainly we could look at that, and I would hope then at that point, whether or not there is, are you all looking for any kind of determination today on cost or cost sharing?
Well, I think they'd love one, but I don't think we're going to get one, so.
Well, you won't get numbers, but I mean, clearly, this whole thing is about the process. What is the benefit to the client or the customer, and what is the benefit to the OUA? And that's where we ultimately need to go. So clearly, I can reach out to try to find out if there are other customers out there, and what is the benefit to the OUA, which helps the overall cost of the project.
The benefit to
Somebody
both of
reach
us.
out to Regina
Regina?
Hamrick,
That's no
across the
problem.
road. Just throwing things out.
Yeah, but they got everything on the other side of them.
I,
Other than on
again,
the other side of Taylor Creek, but.
I think we just need to get a little more information and see what kind of participation we could get down there. I'm not opposed to it at all. I'm just, I think we have to, you were here through part of we're getting ready to have to raise
Yes.
rates to be able to maintain a,
Yes, and we're not asking for something for nothing. We're looking at cost sharing as well, because we know we're going to have to spend that money with septic and drain field, and we already have a well out there, so we don't want to spend money and have to, 2 years down the road, 3 years down the road.
there we
have
go
to-
by.
Yeah, there you go. So it's like,
make any sense.
we have an idea that you're going to need the water at some point, and I say, it's already been drawn, it's already been engineered to have it done, so this would be the time. But, we need to table it for this meeting is fine, but we just need to.
Yeah, we
keep in
just
mind.
need to,
Bring it back at the next meeting.
yeah, we need to,
Have all the necessary
That's good.
information.
yeah, we have a responsibility,
Do due diligence, sure.
Yeah, so,
Absolutely.
And I'm sure before
I'm
it's
sorry,
done,
All right.
I seen him walk in, I'm like, okay, no.
We just want to get this project behind us and keep moving
You have a
forward, so,
reputation here or
thank you, folks. Anytime.
Steve, how long ago was that engineered?
2005.
Would that be usable, John, that engineering study, or would we have to have another one?
The engineering may be, if there was any DEP permits, they've long since expired.
I'm just looking at ways to save money. If that part's already done, you know, through engineering, okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys. We'll look at it and see what we can do.
Thank you for your time.
Hi, Danny. Good.
I think it'd be beneficial to both of us if we can get this
Oh,
project.
Yeah, if we can
Yeah.
figure out how to fund it.
You know, it was amazing that I was in that conversation with Harry the other day, and that's an area he picked out for with that new grant that they're coming out, the $50 million type of thing, and it does include tributaries that go into Lake Okeechobee. That area right there is what he asked me about. He says, do you have any wastewater or anything out there? So the county commission's already looking at that area to assist us if we need some grant money. Now, that might not benefit them a lot, but it could our bar.
I mean, it might. I mean, again, we deal with that situation when you compare the two of larger lot size, lower density, is more costly on a per unit basis to serve than, say, something like Oak Park, where it's smaller lots, high density, vast number of customers. But I didn't want to get off with them, but in answer to was it Villa Margaret and those types of places, there is a design ongoing right now for the Water Management District to build a service center, whatever the right terminology, service center out there near the Forest Service, and they're going to need water and wastewater. So there is some early discussions that they might be running water and wastewater out to serve the Water Management District, of which it would go right by Villa Margaret, which their treatment plant is right out front, and make very easy connection to our system. So that's still in the works.
So water management's going out to the old Boy Scout?
Yes.
Go out to the Forest Service and make a left and go down, so it's on the northwest side of 98. They're going to build a big facility out there.
How far north does the main line go along 441? Is that the terminus right there?
At Cemetery Road and
It goes no
441.
further north? Because there's a church there, there's that Church of God that's right there north, and then that business facility is north of it.
There's 3 commercial businesses up there.
And that across the road from ARS and the churches is that front corridor is deemed that there's a name for it.
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, it's something to do with industry. There, I don't know, some kind of language.
Yes, okay. It's for industrial expansion, business development type of park.
Yes, and it's just been, it's just sold for the first time about a year ago.
Okay.
With a group that's trying to.
Then that would dovetail in with the Water Management District work out there.
Yeah, so that piece over there is, there's a guy out of West Palm pushing to get that developed down the road.
Well, good.
So,
Moving on to item agenda 21, comments from the public.
They left.
They will.
Items from our attorney.
You've heard from me already.
We have the deposition tomorrow.
What else is on there?
Deposition is tomorrow? Video?
I'm sorry, what do you say?
The video deposition is tomorrow, 46
Oh,
Avenue?
well, we'll tell them after it's over with. Yes, we do have video deposition scheduled in our Rocky suit tomorrow morning. Yes.
Items from.
and the saga continues.
Nothing, sir.
Trying to
Anything
put that
from
out
the-
of my mind and forget it, too.
Anything from the board?
I have one thing, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to revisit. A couple of years ago, when we were getting ready to go into the interlocal agreement subcommittee with the county and the city, we polled our board to come up with some ideas that we would like to change in the interlocal agreement. And pretty much general consensus of this board was to do a few things, and one of them was compensation of board members. We did take it to the subcommittee meeting. It was not, did not prevail. I'd like to revisit that at this time if the board so wishes. You know, don't have a plan together, don't have, got plenty of ideas, but no business model together at this point. John and I have basically talked about a few things, but if the board so wishes that we could still move forward with this, maybe we could formulate a plan and meet with the city and the county or whatever direction we needed to go. But to start with, need to make sure the board wants to do this, and that's kind of what I'm looking for right now.
To me, I think one thing that could come into that, and I'm just calling it from an outside, would be, why couldn't the health coverage be extended to board members?
Well, that is part of what compensation's compensation, whether it be
I agree.
an item
I agree.
or monetary issue. And that's kind of what we're looking at right now, or what I'm thinking, and John and I have kicked around a few ideas. But yeah, no, health coverage would definitely be big.
I mean,
As well as the ability.
Again, I think we have to touch through that, the interlocal agreement says no compensation
oh,
for
I know
board
what
members.
it says, yes.
And so you could provide us what is the accepted terminology or definition of compensation? Is it only monetary, or could benefits be technically compensation? If the medical benefits are not considered compensation, then we have to work with our health care provider, because under the PRM with our Blue Cross coverage, right now it is for employees only. So we would have to reach out to them to talk about coverage for board members. We can't do the urgent care because urgent care is stipulated that it's for employees that have health care coverage. So they don't want to be the primary coverage. So there are some steps we have to go through. First and foremost is whether or not health care insurance or benefit is that compensation.
Well, technically it would be, but I mean, I'm just speaking off the cuff. You mentioned it.
Well, I'll use the city, for example, because I was on a couple of volunteer A boards over there, and we did get compensated. So there is a mechanism for it, and all the city councilmen get insurance. So there's ways it can be done through contractual.
Sure there are. I know my school board members get
Exactly.
covered.
So there's ways for it to happen, and I'm just opening a dialogue now. Can we start moving forward and looking to see if there is anything to benefit? We're one of the only boards I know, well, city represented boards that don't get compensated.
Again, I think we would have to get through that.
Ms. Anderson, 25 years on the board, as well as myself.
I think we have to get that determination per the interlocal agreement when it says there's no compensation. What is the definition of compensation, since that is not specifically defined within the interlocal agreement?
In any event, it would take an amendment to the interlocal agreement, whatever we did.
If you determine that the health care benefit is not compensation, then it doesn't change the interlocal agreement.
I don't know how you could say that it were not, that it was not.
But that's what I'm saying. We got to get that definition is what is compensation? Is it monetary?
Get the approval to move forward here, then we can look into the nuts and bolts of it.
I think that would be the key, yeah.
And I think it goes back to your point, though, originally, Mr. Creasman, is what is the board's pleasure? If the board's pleasure universally is to move forward with compensation of some sort, then we get a definitive answer as to what is compensation. And if it requires a change to the interlocal agreement, then I think you have a board committee meet with the BOCC members and the city council to see if they're receptive to changing the interlocal agreement. If it is, then we can move forward with the.
Well, I would think that an inquiry to the health coverage people to find out, is that a possibility? Can it be done? What would it be the requirement to have it to be done?
And we have started that, but again.
I mean, which comes first, chicken or the egg? So.
Well, I would hope that if we get some definitive answer, well, first and foremost, is this a direction of the board, as far as compensation? If it is, then we get that determination of what
Well, you
compensation.
could always do an amendment to say it would not prevent the board from providing health insurance as far as the compensation, they're thinking about dollars. They're thinking about
Yeah, I personally I don't want to be paid, but I'd take benefits. I'd take insurance. I mean, I'm all for that.
Tom, would it be appropriate just to show of hands who wants to proceed and who doesn't, where we don't have to do motion and all that? And
Yeah,
if
that's
there's
easy enough,
interest?
Don. That-
All those who would like, all those who
Get your hand up, John. You started this.
I was waiting for him to stop talking.
All those who would?
Can I vote?
But would we not
It ain't gonna count, but you can vote.
address the majority of the voting as well? In other words,
Oh,
if we had to vote
supermajority?
supermajority?
That's in the local
Well,
agreement stuff.
we've tried that. We've tried that.
Yeah, they were pretty adamant on that one.
Yeah, the last thing I really want to do is even crack open that interlocal agreement for an amendment, because it really manifests a lot of ugly stuff out there. If we could do it without doing it like John was alluding to, that would be a wonderful thing. But if we have to, I've already talked to the county commission chair, and he said we could do a workshop once we decide we wanted to move it, if it needed to be done.
Can you give us a determination as to what is this
No, I
is
was
medical
trying to give you an
benefits
easy answer. An
compensation?
easy answer could say, benefits coverage does not constitute compensation for purposes of this agreement. I mean, in any event, I would think the easy answer, instead of avoiding loggerheads, by doing it and then saying, oh, have an argument about whether or not it's compensation, I think legally it would be compensation. I really do.
So you're saying we would look at amending the interlocal agreement?
We would, but I'd want to know whether the insurance company would work with us if that's what we wanted to do and what it would take. Before you go knocking on the door and then the insurance company says,
I'll
oh,
bring
you
it back in
can't do it.
February.
I
I'll
mean,
bring it back in February.
Thank you.
Other than that, meeting adjourned.